All right now. We're back. My name is Carly Jones, and I'm an employment attorney at the Manifest Justice Law Corporation. So I wanted to come on here today and talk to y'all a little bit about how to pitch your case. There are so many times when I talk to people and I feel like they might have a case, but they are saying things that are making me think otherwise, or they are doing things that's making me feel like, all right, they may have a legal claim, but like, I don't trust them as a client or as a potential witness or as a potential whomever. And there are also times I've like talked to family and friends and they have told me situations that they're going through, but then they can't find a lawyer. And when I tell them to ask, like, okay, tell me what you say to intake. Like, what are you saying to these attorneys when you're calling the law firms? Why can't you find a lawyer? And then they'll tell me their story. And I'm like, yep, yep, yep. Okay, pause. I get it. Okay, so as an attorney, I wanted to just give a little bit of tips and tricks. The number one thing that you can do to let me stop. Before I even began actually talking to y'all about the best way to pitch your story to get an attorney, I want to like pause and acknowledge that the fact that I have to make this video in and of itself fucking sucks. It's representative of the fact that so many of the attorneys in our field are not trauma informed and that have become so professionally, morally, ethically, like solistically jaded that they have a hard time connecting with humanity. It's also representative of the mass amount of like lack of emotional intelligence that a lot of adults and again people in our field carry. And so the fact that the burden is on potential clients, the burden is on us, you, the people, to not only have gone through something that has harmed you, caused injuries, and now you're having to like dedicate extra time and effort into representing yourself and finding someone to help you advocate for yourself. But now you have this additional burden of making sure that when you tell your story to a complete stranger of what happened to you and why you need help and support, that you do it in the right way and in the way that's going to be like most appeasing to this business company and these, again, strangers who you've never met. So if we as a profession, lawyers were more emotionally intelligent, trauma informed, and like gone to therapy and taking our mental health breaks, and we're able to like actually connect with people on a deeper, more realistic level, then perhaps I wouldn't have to make videos like this. I want to also say, like, part of why our field and again, people in our profession, lawyers, are so like health deprived and like humanistic deprived is because of also the amount of workload that exists. Like, there are too many legal cases and too many legal violations that exist in our current time to even like get on the books of a calendar to see a court like within this year, usually for civil cases. So there's also just like an abundance of illegal conduct and harmful conduct that occurs in our country. And so there's a lot of work that attorneys do. It's very common that I will speak to other attorneys, colleagues of mine, and they'll just be like, the phone doesn't stop ringing. And like, we don't know what to do. And speaking as an attorney who has to say no to people, it's heartbreaking. And just the amount of times that you have to say no and shut off the feelings that go with that and try to like stop thinking about whatever situation you just heard about and had to say no to, like that is, it can be incredibly taxing. So just all around, I want to make a disclaimer that says it really fucking sucks that we can't just meet people where they're at and help fill in the blanks and assume things. And that we as lawyers are trying to make quick judgment business decisions in the span of a 20 to 30-minute initial phone call conversation with someone. And that if that person who's on the other line doesn't say specific things or doesn't act in a specific way or isn't responding a specific way, we have a harder time as lawyers hearing the actual legal wrong that has occurred. There are certain things you can do, certain things that you can say that will make your legal claims stand out from your story more when you're telling your story, and therefore it makes your claim more desirable for an attorney to want to take on. Of course, the more desirable your case may be, then the more attorneys will want to take on the case, and therefore the more options you will have and choice you'll have when choosing who you're going to work with as your legal representation. Okay, so let's get into it. The number one thing that you can do when you are looking for an attorney and you're preparing to go into the intake process, which again, it's so time consuming. It can be incredibly emotional. It can be really overwhelming. There can be a lot of information and just it can be hyper stimulating. You're telling perhaps a very vulnerable story to complete strangers, and sometimes you have to tell it to multiple people because typically there's an intake person and then maybe there's a couple of rounds of intake before you even speak to an attorney. Yeah, it can be tough. So again, the fact that you even have to think about this sucks. But the number one thing you can do is like before you start calling attorneys and before you start into that intake process, have a plan. Like practice maybe even saying your story a couple of times. I know it can be really difficult sometimes. There's not just one specific incident that has happened, that has occurred, that makes it like this is when the legal violation occurred. Sometimes there's a process of grooming, there's a process of normalization that occurs. There's maybe like a lot of exposure signs and red flags before something seriously occurs that makes your alarm bells go off. But it can be really difficult sometimes to pinpoint when is the beginning and when do I even start my story. So having a couple of times where you practice and see what comes out, or you practice or you even write it down and you think about what can you not leave out or where would that starting point be, that can be incredibly helpful. Saying it a few times so that you know that you can say it pretty succinctly and that you're not going to be trying to tell your story and speaking for like a 15-20 minute monologue, because most likely the person doing intake will interrupt you and will not have time for that. They'll probably have 15 to 20 minutes slotted in total to be talking to someone. Um, so having a plan and having practiced telling your story before going into intake can be incredibly, incredibly helpful. And it also can make it so that you don't waste a call. Sometimes you call intake and then it's in the process of that first or second call that you realize, oh shit, like I didn't anticipate these questions, or I don't know what I'm going to say here. I wish I would have said this and I didn't say that. And so getting a few times practice in on your own so that you don't waste a call with an attorney, making those mistakes can be incredibly helpful. Okay, another thing that you can do that is really, really, really highly important is to use the right words. So I've made videos on this channel before talking about how if you don't know what kind of legal claims you're looking for, or what kind of lawyer you're looking for to resolve your legal claims, that you can call. Most local bar associations will have free legal referral services, and they will refer you for free to an attorney, and they'll tell you what kind of law you're dealing with and what kind of lawyer you need to be looking for. So once you know that, do a little bit of preliminary research. If you've had to contact the bar association, or if you just already think that you know, or if you want to skip those steps entirely and like type it into Google or ChatGPT or something, you can find the types of law in different ways. But if you do a little bit of research ahead of time, read about what kind of laws, read about the different terms that are used. If we're talking about discrimination, maybe we're talking about disparate treatment. If we're talking about harassment, maybe we're talking about repeated offensive behavior. We're talking about harms that have been inflicted. And so you want to make sure you kind of hit these key buzzwords when you're on the phone with an attorney so that your legal claims really pop out to them. It also demonstrates to your attorney that you kind of know what you're talking about a little bit. Obviously, we don't expect folks to be experts or even have like a basic understanding of the law, but if you can just use a couple of terms, even if you use them incorrectly, that can be incredibly helpful to an attorney in helping them hear what you think your claims are and helping them identify what your legal claims could be. If you call an attorney and you talk about how someone was being a bitch at work, or if they were just like being bossy, or if they were bullying you, or if you call an attorney, an employment attorney, and you try to talk about how someone was giving you job tasks, that's not your role, then this is like kind of typical work drama, work bullshit that shouldn't be happening. And that's definitely annoying and can have a negative impact on our health and our psyche and everything. But that's not, bullying isn't illegal. Being a bitch isn't illegal. Giving someone job tasks who isn't your manager isn't the one who's supposed to be doing that. That's annoying, but it's not illegal. Someone doing those things only to you because you are the only Latin American at the Latina at the office, or someone doing that to you because you're the only disabled person at the office, or the only one who they know has a disability, or just they know that you have a disability and so they mix in some kind of like retard comments or some discriminatory comments, then those things are illegal. If we talk about harassment instead of bullying, harassment is illegal where bullying is not. And you get what I'm saying there, right? So if you use the proper terms, that's going to help an attorney better identify your claims, and then also have faith that you as a client, you understand what's going on. You understand the legal wrongs, and the attorney isn't going to have to coach you very much. As an attorney, we don't want to bring frivolous or unnecessary claims. And so when we are thinking about intake and we're talking to new potential clients, we're trying to judge how valid are these claims, how legitimate are these claims, has there been a legal violation, how severe is the violation, do they understand that there's a violation, was there a harm, how severe is the harm. And so if we are having to fill in the blanks for our potential clients and the potential client isn't saying that, that's not helpful. If you're saying, wow, there's this bitch at work and she did X, Y, and Z, and I'm pissed off and annoyed about it, I'm sorry to hear that. And I'm probably pissed off and annoyed to hear about it on your behalf as well. But I'm not necessarily seeing a harm. If you're saying someone was harassing me on a continuous basis, this was how it was oppressive. And as a result, I haven't been able to sleep the same for the past 6 months. Or now I'm going to my doctor and he says I've got high blood pressure. Or I used to do yoga all the time and I'm so fucking angry and pissed off. Now I can't do yoga at all. I don't write anymore. Like I don't see my friend, whatever. Like there has to be some damages. There's got to be some harm inflicted. We've got to see again harassment and discrimination or retaliation and not just bullying or bitchiness or cattiness or like a fucking stupid man, whatever. There has to be legal basis for your claims. And if you use the right buzzwords, you will help establish to the attorney that you see there is a legal basis here. Another key thing that you can do to help pitch your case to attorneys is that you can listen very carefully to what the attorney is telling you. We are trained from the time we go to law school to be incredibly intentional about like what we say, how we say it, and whom we say it to. And so if an attorney is saying to you certain things like, I don't hear that you've got a harm, or I'm not seeing discrimination, what do you think about that? Or, if they're saying certain things to you and they're using buzzwords, that's something to also pick up on. In previous videos, I preach this all the time. When you're looking for an attorney, you call multiple attorneys. Even if the first attorney you speak to wants to take on your case, again, you always call and speak to multiple attorneys before signing any retainer agreement. And in that process of speaking to multiple attorneys, you will hear feedback from the different various attorneys. And so if you take note on which parts the attorney gave you feedback on, or what did they want to talk to you about a lot, or what did they have questions on, that will give you feedback and some, informed data information that you can apply to the next call. You can kind of edit and shift what you're saying to the next attorney based off of what you have heard from the other ones. So an attorney is not going to say anything to you by mistake, and they're not going to ask you questions that have no basis or no reason. And so even if you don't know the reason why, you can always ask. You can always say like, well, why do you ask? Why do you want to know? What makes you think that? But investigate and be curious. But again, you can also write it down, look it up online, and think about it, bring it to the next attorney. Each time you speak with an attorney, it should be an opportunity for you to learn information that can help you in the next time you speak to an attorney. Or again, that can just be applied to your case in general. Okay, so you're going to have a plan. You're going to do a little bit of research and use the right buzzwords. You're going to not use the incorrect words, and you're going to listen to the attorney when they're giving you tips and tricks and asking you questions so that you understand a little bit more about your case. Another thing that is really key is have your documentation prepared. You're not going to have all of your documentation prepared. You don't need to have your whole case ready and laid out, but just to find an attorney. But what you should have are like maybe the top 3 pieces of evidence that you have, like the top most recent, or the things that you are just like, wow, smoking gun, the things that you think the attorney needs to see, or the things that you think most validate the claims that you are making. Again, you don't have to have all of your evidence flushed out and ready and prepared to give the attorney when you're just on the look, when you're just trying to find an attorney. But you should have, at bare minimum, you should, especially for employment law, you should have some form of proof of employment, some pay stubs, some hiring contracts, etc. You should have as well some form of like an email that you've sent, something that they've sent to you, Slack messages, text messages, something to substantiate your claims. Okay? That's really key, because if an attorney is interested in taking your case, that's the first thing they're going to ask for. Some type of proof to validate that what you're saying is true, who you're saying you are is true, and that you've worked at this place is also true. So have that ready. Okay, so you're going to have your documentation ready. You're going to have your story ready. You're going to be ready to be succinct and concise and know what you want to say. You're going to research ahead of time what these claims potentially are, what kind of law you're dealing with so that you know the right buzzwords to use. You're going to also, with using the right buzzwords, not use the wrong words. You're going to try to stay away from non-legalese language like bullying or like bitchiness or cattiness or it's not her job, and focus on discrimination, disparate treatment, retaliation, harassment. You're going to focus on the correct buzzwords. You're going to listen to the tips and tricks and questions that the attorney is asking of you so that you can learn about your case each time you speak to an attorney. You're going to have your documentation prepared and ready to go so that when the attorney says, yes, we want to work with you, show me some documentation, show me some validation, you have that ready to go. And you're also going to make sure that you are super, super respectful. The last couple things that you can really do to help bolster your claims and like make your call a little bit more appealable to an attorney is be kind, be respectful, of course. And that's like from the first person who answers your phone to the last person you speak to. Ask questions, like come prepared to ask a couple of questions. Do not hesitate. There's no question too stupid, no question too long. That is literally what your consult is for. And end it with always asking for a referral. So whether you like who you spoke to or not, whether you actually got through to the attorney or not, always ask for a legal referral. You should ask for who's the next best person you can talk to, if not this firm. And even again, if you like that firm, always ask for a referral so that you can compare. How do you know how much you like a firm unless you've talked to other firms and understand who you're working with and like what they will bring to the table and how they compare to their colleagues in the field. So that's pretty much it. To quickly summarize, you're going to know your story, practice your story ahead of time, say it succinctly, concisely, be ready to go. You're going to do a little bit of research on the terminology and the types of law at issue so that you can use the right terms and avoid the wrong terms. You're going to listen to the attorney when you speak to them very, very, very carefully. You'll take notes, you'll ask questions as needed, and you'll use that information to inform you and what you're going to say in the next call with your next attorney. You will have your documentation prepared and ready to go so that you can validate your claims and validate your employment as soon as the attorney is asking you to do so. You're going to be kind and respectful. And again, you're going to talk about the harms that were inflicted on you. You're going to talk about who was involved in the case, who knew about it, who should have known about it, had reason to know, but just dug their head under the sun and acted like they didn't know. You're going to ask questions, and then you're going to be super respectful. And at the end of the call, you're going to ask for another legal referral. Those are some things you can do to help pitch your case to an attorney and have more successful results. If you feel like this was not helpful, or if you have questions about anything that I said in this video, or related to anything I said in this video, please feel free, drop your questions down below in a comment, and I will make a video response as soon as I get the chance and hopefully answer your questions, do a better job. If you did find this information helpful and empowering and that it might help you get a little bit more money, then you can also let me know that and drop that in the comment or give me a like, give me a thumbs up, share this content. Maybe you know a friend who's going through an employment suit and this could be beneficial to them. All right. Until next time, you know, everybody works, but not everyone is safe at work. I'm trying to make sure you know the difference. Take care. Bye, everyone.